Narrator, calm but dramatic tone. The chandeliers sparkled like stars above as laughter echoed to the marble halls of the Blackwood estate. Crystal glasses clinked. Diamonds flashed. Every guest glowed with wealth and vanity. Suddenly, the grand doors opened. A hush fell over the crowd. There she stood, the maid, but not in her uniform. Tonight, she wore a flowing emerald gown that shimmered like silk under moonlight. Her posture was regal, her steps silent, powerful, and on her finger, a ring that caught the light and stole the room's breath. Whispers rippled across the ballroom like a shock wave. The millionaire who invited her dropped his glass, because what no one knew was, this maid held a secret that would unravel the very empire built on lies. And tonight it all begins. Narrator, soft, reflective tone, long before the glittering lights and golden halls. Victoria moved through this mansion like a shadow, quiet, efficient, invisible. She was the maid, not because she lacked intelligence or strength, but because life had forced her to wear humility like armor. Each morning, before the city woke, she swept the marble floors, polished the portraits of men who built their empire on silence. She served champagne she would never taste, washed silk sheets she'd never sleep in, and yet she never complained. Her smile warm, her voice calm, her heart proud, but the guests never saw her. To them, she was just the help. They would drop napkins at her feet on purpose, spill wine just to watch her kneel. Whispers followed her like perfume. Did you see her shoes? Poor thing can't afford polish. That one's been here forever, like furniture. And above them all stood Richard Blackwood, the heir, the face of charm with a snake's tongue behind closed doors. His empire wasn't built with sweat. It was inherited like an old trophy. Richard wore money like a mask, smiling wide for the cameras and sneering at those below. To him, Victoria was a joke that came with the house. And beside him, Helena, his picture-perfect wife. Cold as winter, crueler than rumors. She often watched Victoria with mocking pity. That poor thing, still cleaning up after men who'll never notice her. But they were wrong. Victoria noticed everything. The way Richard locked one drawer in his study. The way Helena flinched when the name Henry Blackwood was mentioned. The whispers that vanished when she entered rooms too quickly. She kept her silence. She earned their trust. And in her pocket, she kept the truth. Narrator, cold, steady tone, one afternoon, while Victoria dusted the grand piano in the drawing room. Richard strolled in with a smirk stretched across his sculpted face. He was holding a golden envelope, thick and shiny, the kind that meant exclusive. He snapped his fingers. You there? Victoria, right? She paused, nodded gently. We're hosting the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala tomorrow night. Thought we'd add a little flair to the guest list. He walked over, dropped the envelope onto the freshly polished piano. You're invited. The room fell silent. Two socialites sipping wine on velvet couches nearly choked with laughter. Helena arched an eyebrow. That's generous, dear, she said. Her voice dipped in mock sweetness. Though I doubt she owns anything elegant. It's a black tie event, Victoria. Dress code, maximum elegance. Richard's words oozed sarcasm. The envelope sat like a golden lie, shimmering, poisonous. Do show up. It'll be fun, he added, then turned to his guests. Actually, he raised his voice. I'll put 100 grand on it. She won't dare show her face. Laughter erupted like wildfire. $100,000? For that? She can't even afford a ticket to the subway. Victoria stood still, calm, silent. Her hands clenched around the feathered duster behind her back. I clean your silver, Mr. Blackwood. Not your shame, she whispered softly, so no one could hear. But she heard everything, and when she looked down at that envelope, she didn't see an insult. She saw an opportunity. They had mocked her into the spotlight. Now she would use it. Narrator. Slow, dramatic tone. The night the gala arrived. Champagne flowed like fountains. Strings played beneath chandeliers shaped like crystal galaxies. The Blackwood estate shimmered with gold, glitter, and gossip. Guests wore diamonds, pearls, silk flown in from Paris. And just as the clock struck 8, The music faltered. The front doors opened. Gasps swept through the ballroom like a cold wind. She entered, Victoria. But this was not the maid they knew. She walked as if she had walked those halls her whole life. Not with the quiet shuffles of a servant, but with the confidence of a woman who belonged. Her dress was emerald green, floor-length, cut from satin that whispered with every step. A deep V-neck framed a simple diamond pendant, and her natural curls were pinned into a crown of grace. Her skin glowed, her posture regal, and on her finger, the ring. That sapphire shimmered like ice under the chandelier. Someone whispered too loud, "Is that the maid?" Helena nearly dropped her champagne. Richard's jaw locked. The room frozen. No laughter, no clinking glasses, just silence, and the sound of her heels clicking against a marble like thunder. Eyes followed her, wide and unblinking. Women pulled their shawls tighter. Men stood straighter. The pianist missed a note. Victoria didn't flinch. She walked through the ballroom like a queen returning to her palace. And the cruelest part? She smiled. Because in that moment, with every eye on her, she wasn't a maid. She was a storm they never saw coming. Narrator, tense, slow-burning tone. The silence didn't last long. Whispers rose like steam off boiling water. Where'd she get that dress? Thrift store clearance. Maybe she stole it from Helena's closet. Do maids even know what designer labels are? Clusters of socialites clutched their pearls with fake shock, sipping champagne like it gave them permission to sneer. The laughter was low, but sharp, razor-thin and poisonous. Victoria didn't flinch. She made her way to the edge of the ballroom, holding her head high. Every step calm, every movement controlled. Then came the sound of a spoon tapping crystal. Clink, clink, clink. Richard stood at the center of the room, champagne flute in hand, grin wide as a crocodile. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're all enjoying this beautiful evening of wealth, giving and surprises. The crowd chuckled politely. Now, I want to take a moment to highlight a very special guest tonight. Someone who, until recently, preferred to remain behind the scenes. He motioned toward Victoria, who had just taken a glass of water from a passing tray. Everyone, please welcome our guest of honor, our lovely maid. Gasps. Laughter exploded like a popped champagne cork. Cameras flashed. One woman dropped her phone. Another man chuckled into his drink and muttered, "Classy prank, Blackwood." Helena smiled tight, watching Richard like he'd just performed a magic trick. Victoria turned slowly to face the crowd. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply stared like someone watching a show that hadn't gotten to the good part yet. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that tonight's performance was only getting started. And the punchline? It was an honor. Narrator. Slow, sharp tone as the power begins to shift. The last chuckles hadn't even died out when Victoria raised her glass. Not to drink, but to speak. Her voice rang out through the glittering silence, calm and poised. "You invited me to laugh," she said, her eyes fixed on Richard. "But I came to remind you, I belong here more than anyone." The room tensed. The same mouths that had whispered jokes moments earlier now hung half open, unsure whether to laugh again or listen. Victoria took a breath, and with it, the room seemed to shrink around her. "I've polished the floors beneath your shoes, cleaned up after your champagne tantrums. I've heard your lies echo off the marble long after the music stopped." Eyes shifted. Drinks were set down. "You think I'm just a maid, but I've been here longer than most of your marriages." A few smirked nervously, but no one dared speak. "I know which wine you spill when you're angry. I know who Helena really visits when Richard's working late. I know the smell of panic in your laundry." A few heads turned toward Helena. Her eyes narrowed. Richard stepped forward slightly, clearing his throat, but Victoria raised a finger gently, stopping him. "You brought me here as a joke, but the real joke..." She paused, then delivered it like a blade. "You thought I wouldn't show, but tonight, you're the ones who don't belong." Cameras didn't flash. They shook. Phones weren't raised. They were lowered. In just 2 minutes, The energy of the entire room had changed. Victoria hadn't screamed, hadn't cried, hadn't begged. She had spoken, and in doing so, she'd taken a room from Richard. And he knew it. Narrator. Dramatic. Steady tone building to shock. Victoria's words still floated in the air like smoke from a fire not yet seen. Then, slowly, she raised her left hand. A single light from the chandelier above caught the gemstone on her finger. Blue, deep, cold as ocean glass. A sapphire. Gasps rippled through the room like thunder behind sealed windows. The ring wasn't just beautiful. It was unmistakable. It bore the Blackwood family crest. A shield engraved with two lions, the initials HB etched beneath in delicate gold. Helena's face drained of color. Richard's eyes widened. Victoria looked down at it for a moment, as if remembering the man who had placed it on her mother's trembling hand. Then she looked up. "This ring," she said softly, her voice cutting through the stillness, "was given to my mother by Henry Blackwood." The crowd stirred. Yes, that Henry, Richard's father, the founder of this estate, the man whose portrait hangs above your fireplace, and who you all pretend was perfect. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the back. He loved a woman once, a quiet, graceful woman who played piano in the servants' quarters, a woman he never introduced to this world. Victoria's fingers gently brushed the ring. That woman was my mother. And this, she lifted the ring higher, letting the light catch it, was his promise to her. Helena staggered a step back. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is she serious?" Another murmured, "This can't be real." Victoria's gaze never left Richard. "You see me as a maid, but the truth is, I'm a Blackwood, just like you." Richard tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat like glass. Because in that moment, everyone knew this wasn't just scandal. This was blood. Narrator, gentle, emotional tone with a slow build of drama. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound in the room was a quiet hum of the chandeliers, like even they were holding their breath. Victoria lowered her hand slowly and took a step forward. "My mother's name was Eliza," she began, voice steady but wrapped in memory. "She wasn't rich. She didn't wear jewels or silk, but she had a gift, music. She taught piano to children of the wealthy. That's how she came to this house." Gasp stirred. She was hired to teach Richard's older sister. But it wasn't the children she caught the eye of. She looked toward the towering oil painting on the wall. Henry Blackwood, standing tall in his navy suit, hand on a globe. It was him. All eyes followed hers. He would come to her lessons, say he wanted to hear the music. Then the notes turned to glances. Glances into meetings. Meetings into something more. Helena's lips parted, eyes wide with disbelief. He promised her everything. Said she was the only woman who truly saw him. That he'd leave his wife, start over. Said the world didn't need to know. Not yet. Just wait. Victoria's voice trembled, but only for a second. Then she got pregnant, and he disappeared. The crowd stiffened. She wrote him, again and again. And when I was born, she sent a letter with a photo of me, a baby in a blanket, holding the same ring I wear now. She raised her eyes to Richard, but he never responded. "Because your mother burned the letters before he could read them." The room gasped again. Richard's skin turned pale. "She kept that ring as proof. She told me, one day, if they ever forget yours, show them." Victoria stepped into the center of the ballroom now. No longer a maid, no longer a mystery. "You are my half-brother, Richard. And this house, this name, this legacy you throw around like a crown, it's mine too." Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another murmured, "She's telling the truth." But Richard, he didn't say a word. He couldn't, because deep down he already knew. Narrator, calm but cutting. As truth shatters illusion, the room trembled beneath a silence that felt heavier than sound. Richard stood frozen, his lips barely parted. Helena gripped her clutch so tightly her knuckles turned white. But Victoria wasn't finished. She reached into her handbag, not rushed, not frantic. with the ease of a woman who knew what she carried would change everything. One by one, she laid the truth on the table beside the champagne tower. First, a handwritten will, yellowed at the edges, sealed in wax with the same blackwood crest as the ring. "This is my father's original will," Victoria said. "It names me his daughter as a beneficiary. A copy kept in a safety deposit box my mother never touched until the day she died." Gasps echoed. Second, bank transfer records. Dozens of them, dated years ago. Large sums of money funneled quietly to an account under Liza's name. He didn't forget her. He supported her until the last few months of his life, when suddenly the payments stopped. Helena looked like she'd seen a ghost. That's when the poisoning began. The room froze. A door opened at the back of the ballroom. An older man stepped forward, gray suit, medical badge, trembling hands. "Dr. Hamilton?" someone whispered. Victoria nodded. Family physician for over 20 years. He was there when Henry Blackwood took his final breath. Dr. Hamilton's voice cracked as he spoke. The symptoms, they weren't from age. They were consistent with low-dose poisoning over time. I raised concerns. He looked down, but Helena insisted it was just stress. She refused testing. That will was never meant to disappear. Mouths dropped. Phones now quietly recorded. Victoria turned toward Helena and Richard. "You silenced my mother. You buried my blood, but you didn't bury the truth." Helena staggered. Richard stared at the floor, because now no denial could cover what had just been uncovered. The empire wasn't just tainted, it was built on theft. And tonight, the reckoning had finally arrived. Narrator, crisp, heavy tone with rising finality. Before the whispers could finish circling the room, the ballroom doors opened again. This time, no music followed. Only the clicking steps of a man in a navy suit, briefcase in hand, glasses low on his nose. Attorney David Chun. He walked with purpose, flanked by two uniformed officers standing just outside the grand entry. "Apologies for the interruption," Chun said calmly, stepping beside Victoria. "But I represent the interests of Miss Victoria Eliza Blackwood and the true estate of Henry Blackwood." The crowd gasped. Richard's head snapped up. "You can't be serious," he said, voice cracking. "This is a private matter. She has no legal standing." Correction, Chun cut in, opening his briefcase. "She has every legal standing. DNA evidence, bank records, original will, all authenticated. The estate has been fraudulently inherited." He looked at Richard flatly. "And by law, it must be redistributed." Richard staggered back. No, this can't be happening." He turned to Helena. "You told me it was gone. You said everything was handled." But Helena stepped away from him now, her face hollow. David Chun didn't stop. "Authorities have been notified. Detectives will arrive shortly. Until then, I suggest you cooperate." Richard spun toward Victoria. "You can't do this. This was my life." Victoria stepped forward, cool and steady. "No, Richard, it was mine before you stole it." And for the first time that night, Richard Blackwood had nothing left to say. Narrator, quiet, cold tone as the empire crumbles. Richard's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the champagne table, but it gave way. Glasses shattered. Foam spilled like blood on silk. He collapsed to the floor, breath shallow, face pale. Around him, the room shifted, but not toward him. His friends, the ones who laughed loudest at Victoria, now stepped back, eyes avoiding his. Even Helena just stood there, frozen, tears streaking down her makeup. But she didn't move to help. She didn't speak, because there was nothing left to defend. Victoria stepped forward, not in triumph, but in truth. She looked down at the man who tried to turn her life into a joke. "I didn't do this for revenge," she said softly. "I did it for truth." And in that moment, the laughter, the whispers, the lies, all of it finally ended. Narrator, slow, poetic tone as justice settles. Victoria walked past the crowd. They parted for her now, not out of politeness, but reverence. She stepped onto the grand balcony. Camera flashes erupted below. Reporters swarmed the gates. The The world, once silent about her existence, now begged to know her name. The wind caught her hair. The sapphire on her finger shimmered like it always belonged. She looked out at the city, calm, unbothered, whole. She came as a joke, the narrator whispered, but left as a queen. And as the final image lingered, her silhouette in the moonlight above a crumbling empire, the screen faded to black. Final line. Never underestimate the quiet one in the room. She might be holding the truth that ends your empire,